There's a very specific kind of tension that doesn't announce itself right away. It doesn't come in loud or dramatic. It sort of sits quietly under a conversation, like a hum you don't notice until it starts to get louder. And that's the feeling that keeps surfacing when you spend time with all in the family, especially when the focus drifts toward masculinity, not in the abstract sense, but in the lived, everyday sense of what it means to be a man in a world that is slowly, sometimes uncomfortably, changing. And I keep thinking about one particular kind of situation that brings that into sharp focus, one where Archie's sense of identity, his idea of what it means to be strong, capable, respected, starts to feel like it's being challenged, not by anything dramatic, not by some external crisis, but by something as simple as a shift in roles, a conversation about work or independence or even just respect. It begins, as it often does, in that living room, that space that feels both safe and exposed at the same time. And Archie is there, grounded in his chair, carrying that quiet authority he believes he's earned, the kind that comes from years of doing things a certain way, from understanding the world through a specific lens. And then something changes. Maybe Gloria mentions wanting to take on more responsibility outside the home. Maybe Mike talks about a different kind of work. Something less physical, more intellectual. Something that doesn't fit into Archie's definition of labor. And at first, it might sound like a normal conversation. But then you see it. That slight shift in Archie's expression, that tightening, that moment where the conversation stops being about ideas and starts being about something deeper, something tied to identity, to pride, to what it means to matter. Because for Archie, masculinity isn't just a concept, it's a structure, a set of expectations that define his place in the world. And when those expectations are questioned, even indirectly, it feels like something is being taken away from him. And that's where the tension begins to build, not through action, but through reaction, through the way he responds, the way his voice carries a little more weight, a little more defensiveness. Mike steps in, as he always does, but what's interesting here is that his challenge isn't just about ideas. It's about redefining what strength looks like, what value looks like. And that's where things get complicated, because even if his perspective is forward-looking, even if it's rooted in equality and progress, it can feel like an attack to someone who's built their entire identity around a different set of rules. Gloria feels it too, but in a different way, because for her, this isn't just a debate. It's personal. It's about her life, her choices. Her sense of independence and her emotional response brings another layer to the conversation. Something more immediate, more urgent. And then there's who moves through the moment with that quiet kindness that doesn't confront masculinity directly, but gently reshapes the space around it, offering a kind of emotional support that doesn't challenge Archie head-on, but still changes the tone of the room. What makes this kind of scene so compelling is that the pressure on masculinity isn't presented as a single moment of crisis. It's a gradual, ongoing process, something that builds through conversation, through small shifts, through the accumulation of moments that challenge long-held beliefs. And the living room setting amplifies all of it, because there's nowhere to hide, no way to escape the conversation. It just continues, unfolding in real time with every reaction feeding into the next. The humor in these moments comes from that tension, from the way Archie tries to hold onto his sense of control, from the way he expresses his views with certainty even when they're being challenged, and from the way Mike responds, sometimes with logic, sometimes with frustration, sometimes with a kind of disbelief. You might laugh at how firmly Archie clings to his definition of masculinity, at how he frames his arguments, at how he tries to assert his position, and at the same time you might feel the discomfort underneath it, the recognition that this isn't just about being right, it's about feeling secure. And that's what made All in the Family so groundbreaking, especially in the context of 1970s America, because it was willing to explore these kinds of tensions openly, to show how changing social roles affected not just systems, but individuals, identities, relationships. This was a time when traditional ideas about masculinity were being questioned, when new possibilities were emerging, and the show captured that shift not through grand statements, but through everyday conversations, through the way those changes played out in a single room. As the scene continues, you start to notice how Archie's reactions aren't just about resistance. They're about fear, about uncertainty, about the sense that something familiar is slipping away. And that fear becomes part of the comedy, not in a way that mocks it completely, but in a way that exposes it. Mike's challenges push that fear into the open, forcing it to be examined even if it's not fully acknowledged. And Gloria's responses highlight the emotional impact of those expectations, the way they affect real lives. His presence, as always, provides a kind of balance, a reminder that even in the middle of conflict, there's still room for understanding, for connection. And yet nothing is fully resolved. Archie doesn't suddenly redefine his sense of masculinity. He doesn't abandon the beliefs that have shaped him. But there are moments, small ones, where something shifts, where he hesitates, where you can see the possibility of change, even if it doesn't fully take hold. And that's where the show feels so honest, because it doesn't pretend that identity can be reshaped in a single conversation. It shows how deeply rooted these ideas are, how they persist even when they're challenged. As the tension begins to ease, as the conversation winds down, there's no clear victory, no moment where one perspective triumphs over another, just a gradual return to something quieter. But the pressure remains just beneath the surface, ready to emerge again in another conversation, another situation. Watching it now, you can still feel how relevant it is, because questions about masculinity, about identity, about roles and expectations are still very much part of the cultural conversation. The specifics may have changed, the language may be different, but the underlying tension, the challenge of adapting to change, of redefining what it means to belong, to matter, that remains. And that's why the show continues to resonate, because it doesn't offer easy answers. It doesn't simplify the conflict, it lets it exist. It lets it be messy, uncomfortable, and real. As the living room settles back into its familiar rhythm, as the characters return to their routines, there's a sense that the conversation isn't over, that it's just paused, waiting to continue. And maybe that's the most important thing the show does. It keeps the conversation alive. It invites you to sit with it, to think about it, to recognize those same dynamics in your own life. So when the moment ends, when the room grows quiet again, there's still something lingering, something unresolved, something that stays with you. And that's the kind of storytelling that doesn't fade, because it's not just about what happens, it's about what it reveals, about the way it reflects something deeper, something ongoing.